Good.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a second episode of the PoArtMo Show. My name is David Ellis, and we have my co-founder of Auroras and Blossoms, Sandrine, with us. Hello, Sandrine. And we also have Elizabeth Shaw, who is someone that we've invited along, who's basically been featured in our latest issue of our Creative Arts Journal. We've actually done a debut Creative Arts Journal, which has short stories, 6-word stories, art and photography and other kind of bits and pieces like that to complement our poetry journal. And Elizabeth has kindly agreed to come along to actually come and chat with us today. Elizabeth is a freelance editor and writer with a bachelor's degree in English from Brigham Young University, Utah, in the United States. She recently co-founded a literary blog where you can find more about her writing, and we can put that link up on the screen. So we're basically going to just interview Elizabeth today, so we can find out more about what she's actually submitted to us and why we submitted it. Why we published it in the Creative Arts Journal. So Elizabeth, what is your artistic background?
Well, I guess it started when I was just a kid. I loved to read, and I tried my hand at writing. My parents would give me journals, and I would fill them up with just little silly stories, and that was the beginning of my artistic journey. I also did ballet and piano lessons, but my passion was always writing and reading, and which is why when I got accepted into university, I studied English as well. So my background is rather simple, but it's mostly in literature.
Gotcha.
Yeah, well, simple, not that simple. Ballet, piano, and everything. It's a lot. It probably gave you a lot of. It prepared you for being a writer, actually, because this is what happened to me. Like I had to learn the piano. My mom forced me. I didn't have the patience, but I love classical music. I love dance and everything, and really prepared me for writing. Gave me the sensitivity. So it's interesting. You have a varied background. So as a writer, how does a piece of writing start for you? Does it start with an image, a form, a particular theme, a story?
Well, it kind of depends. Sometimes it starts with a writing prompt. This essay of mine that's published in the journal is just based off of a writing prompt that I came across. And that writing prompt was, "Tell me about your home," which seemed like it would just be a 1-paragraph answer. But I realized that that question was rather loaded for me. And that became the catalyst for my next creative project. So sometimes it's just through prompts like that that I find in books or in podcasts and anything that I'm trying to educate myself on. Sometimes it does happen through experiences where I do see something or I hear something that sticks with me and I need to process it. And so sometimes that's also the inspiration for my next work, depending on, I guess, my situation and what my feelings are about that will depend on what kind of genre, if I'm going into poetry or if I'm going into an essay or a short story, will all depend on that. But usually it's a little bit of everything, and it just kind of depends on the moment.
And when you're doing your short stories, I mean, are you more like a plotter or a pantser when it comes to working out what happens? Do you have to have a series of points or notes that you have to hit, or do you just like to try and see where the story takes you?
I think it kind of depends. I am newer to fiction than I am to nonfiction. And so with nonfiction, I definitely don't like to plot things because then it gets a little preachy. But with fiction, so far, I've liked having a very loose plotting, I guess, not getting too organized that I back myself into a corner, having that flexibility to scrap my plan if need be. And so I like to have a plan, but I also like to have the flexibility of not having it be shackling me as a writer.
Yeah, sort of a hybrid sort of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Tell us more about Homeward Bound. That's the essay that's featured in our issue. Because as we say, so we're celebrating, today we're celebrating the actual release of the first issue of our Creative Arts Journal. And I kind of sort of basically touched upon that when we were introducing ourselves at the start. But so the whole reason for this particular episode of the show is that you're one of the people that have got. I think we've got sort of 2 or 3 people in the issue that have got short stories, but yours is one of the best ones that we've got in there. One of the strongest ones that we've got in there in terms of. And we're interested in how you came up with the title and how that particular story came to you, really.
Well, the title was one of the latest things that came to me. Like I said, it started with a rather simple writing prompt. And as I was going about my discovery, I guess, as I was writing and thinking through things, researching and all that, I realized that it was a journey. And it was a journey to find home, what that meant to me, and why it was complicated for me, and how I've been dealing with it recently. And when I was listening to just like a YouTube stream of calm music, something that came up was this song, and this folk song, and I realized that is the journey. I'm trying to find home, so why not make this song part of the essay? And eventually, I decided that theme would be the title. It would share the title with the folk song.
It makes sense. It does sound like a kind of like a folky sort of title to me.
I noticed you sounded a little emotional when describing the piece. So is it based on your life, or is it a
This is
fictional
nonfiction.
piece?
Yep, this is completely nonfiction.
Okay, interesting. So that explains the emotion in your voice. You mentioned that the title came after to you, but how does it work for you? Because for me, I need a title first, for sure. I rarely come up with a title after the fact. So how is it for you? Do you come with a title first, in general, first or after the piece?
In general, there are exceptions to this always, but in general, I prefer to wait till the end, because I guess it's kind of like my plotting versus, going for the ride. I like to have a little bit of cushion. And for me, if I have a title too early on, then my mind gets a little too focused and inflexible. And so for me, my work should be able to speak for itself. What is the title that it is speaking to me once it's finished? So that's why I like to do the title later.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Each writer is different.
Yeah.
This is fascinating to hear each person talk about their creative process, because each person has a different answer. So it's really, really interesting. So in general, your writing, does it focus on any specific themes, or do you have special commentary, and how do you factor positivity and inspiration into what you write?
I don't think that I'm a writer that likes to focus on one social theme through all of my writing. There are writers that do that and do that well, but I'm not one of them. And so each piece will maybe have social commentary or not, depending on what it's about and what how strongly I feel about the topic, right? On this particular essay, I think the social commentary is quite subtle, and you could say that it's not even there. But if I were to explain what the social implications are of this essay, I would say it's of the modern fear that young people have of having children, and how it doesn't necessarily need to be something we should fear as much as we do. So that's, I guess that's all that is. And then the second half of the question was about positivity. Is that, how do I factor in positivity? Okay. So for me, to be completely honest, it is difficult for me to be a positive person. It's hard for me to think positively when I'm like in the moment of something frustrating or, sad, And so for me, it's essential. It's essential that I factor in positivity, because if I don't try, it will never come. And usually if I don't try, then it just becomes a rant. It doesn't even become something that anybody would enjoy reading, And so for me, I have to sit back. Sometimes I start off with a positive outlook and I'm writing. Sometimes I have a negative outlook and I have to stop and think, okay, like, where is this silver lining? Like, I know it's there somewhere. And I work through things. Sometimes I have to wait in my own life to find that answer. But for me, it's essential as a writer to look for the positive outcome in the character, or in, I don't know, in the topic. Otherwise, it won't come. So, yeah.
Yeah, I find this very interesting what you just said, because this is exactly what our platform stands for. You look at the silver lining despite maybe being frustrated, maybe despite not seeing things positively, and yet you force yourself to try and find the positive and the inspiration in what you do. So this is wonderful. And honestly, I think that's why, your essay moved us as much as it did, because you're defining exactly what Auroras and Blossoms is all about. So you're actually confirming why you are the perfect artist to appear in our magazine. So thank you very much for that answer. David, you muted yourself.
We just tried, because we've got multiple people on here. We don't want it to interfere with the mics, and then I forget that I've turned it off. I'm on autopilot, I think. Yeah. Our next question, I think we wanted to ask you, Elizabeth, was who and or what are your biggest influences?
Well, my biggest influences are what I'm reading right now. And so usually I will find something that I've read recently that I like, and I'll try to imitate it, or I will run off with the same idea. And that definitely influences me. For this piece, the biggest influences, I would say, were two pieces of literature that I highly recommend to anybody who's listening. The first is Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. I think for me, what I was inspired by and influenced by, that hopefully made it into my essay, was that she brings life to the mundane. She takes things that might seem cliche and makes them fresh and beautiful and meaningful, like really meaningful. For instance, I remember just being in shock by a description that she had. She said one of the characters, basically, like if in our regular speech we would say she was heartbroken, that she was so disappointed in her husband. That's the colloquial speech. But Zora Neale Hurston wrote that something fell off the shelf inside of her, and that was just like mind-boggling to me. Like, wow, that I never would have said it that way, but that is the perfect way to say it, And so that was something that inspired me, was finding beauty in the mundane. And then the second influence for this particular piece that is in the journal was Brian Doyle. This is an essayist from Oregon. He has a collection of essays called Leaping. And they are just fantastic. I'm very disappointed that Brian Doyle is not as popular of a writer, because they're fantastic. And what is amazing about him is that he can find hope in like the most awful of circumstances. Like, he writes about cancer, he writes about birth defects, he writes about terrorism, and yet each of those essays, it makes you feel like there's still hope and there's still something beautiful to be learned. And so that's something that really influenced me, is that the genuine search for the positive, I guess, like we were saying before, as well as accentuating the beauty of life that you don't normally see, I guess. So yeah, those were my biggest influences for this particular piece.
We have that in our kind of submission guidelines as well. We say that I think some people are sort of scared about how they're like, how am I going to create something positive if I've been through a negative experience? And it isn't about ignoring the negative experience. It's about saying, well, was there a lesson learned in terms of how people treated you and how you want to be treated for the future? Or if there's some kind of sort of underlying theme or positivity, it doesn't matter the fact that, a lot of negative kind of situations can lead to a positive outcome depending on how you view them. I mean, some things are so terrible and horrible that you can't physically use them. But that's so we try to be as broad as possible, because I think if you're very kind of sort of positively focused, people think, well, it's just you're happy regardless of anything, and that isn't the case. The whole point of the positivity is to try and jolly people out of the kind of depression or the feelings that they've got at the moment in the times we're in at the moment. So yeah, we really think that's a great philosophy to have, that you've got using those. Do you ever get influenced by other things as well, like music or art or pictures or other images or things? Or
Yeah, I get I get inspired by everything, anything that touches me. But at the same time, I also get inspired by really crummy art. And I know that sounds really funny, but like, I'll listen to the radio and I'll hear something just like totally in left field, and that actually, like, I can't stop thinking about it. So sometimes I get inspired by that too. Not that I'm trying to imitate them, but that I guess they stick with me and they give me an idea. So yeah, I get influenced by anything and everything that's around me. And one way that I try to like notice those things is that I carry around a little pocket-sized notebook. And I just write little notes, and I don't write every day. I just write whenever something hits me. But I know that if I don't write it down, I'm never going to remember it. So yeah, I have an eclectic, I guess, inspirational I don't know.
I've got journals myself, but I tend to run to my phone to type something down, because I can't remember it long enough to actually go and get the journal and then write it down in there, because the phone's always on me, whereas a journal might be tucked away somewhere and with thoughts fleeting. But you're right, if you don't write it down, a lot of the time I keep saying to myself, if something's good, I'm sure I'll remember it, but then I will forget it 5 or 10 minutes later, and I'll just think, oh darn, that's the end of that. Then I'll have to try and come up with something else. But so, yeah, that's great.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're describing what an artist is, like a real artist is. It's about being inspired by everything, little things. And that seem insignificant to many people. But we look at it and oh yeah, like it's a prompt. I can use it to motivate myself to write, and you can write a story about pretty much anything that way, which is always interesting. So our next question is, what would be your dream project? And we said art because it can be writing, it could be a drawing, it could be painting, it could be anything.
Oh man, that's a hard question. I am pretty young in my career, so I have a lot of like Mount Everests I want to climb someday, but might never get to that point. I would say I don't have like a fantasy dream of a project, but I do have like someday when I'm a good enough writer, I'm going to write a novel. I'm not quite to that point where I can write a book length, piece of writing that's good. Never has worked out in the past, but one day it'll work and my dream will come true. So that's my dream. Kind of simple, but
When do you think you'll be ready? That's the big question, because it's so young. We're all young here. There's no old person. Because I know David and I always have ideas to create things. So, and I know I've been writing for many, many, many years. So, I always ask myself, if you don't want to do it now, when do you think you'll be ready? So that's my question to you.
maybe we'll leave that as a rhetorical question. Yeah, I don't know when I'll be ready, and I might never feel ready. So maybe I should just get to it.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the transition is very, very difficult because I write short stories. I've written flash fiction short stories, and I've always been worried about. I've wanted to write a novel, and like you say, it's having the framework that will either create either an individual standalone novel or even a series. And I guess you don't want to get ahead of yourself. You think, let's do the standalone and let's see if I could actually develop it into a series. But I actually started crafting a novel with a friend of mine many years ago, and so we were trying to co-write it, and I wouldn't say our styles necessarily gelled very well together, because when we got it sort of edited, the first 5 chapters that we did, they were just like, "Oh, you'd like to do this as well, do you, David?" And I'm like, "No, that's the other person writing." So unless you're writing something similar, it's like I bet me and Sandrine could probably write a novel together, simply because we've got a lot of similar kind of styles that might gel. But I'm just thinking that there are ways and inroads. It's like if you can't write a novel, then you might publish a collection of essays, for example, and then that's the length of a novel. So you haven't written a novel, but you've got, say, 15, 20 essays that are the equivalent length of a novel, and you could say, therefore, I'm an author because I've published these essays.
Mm-hmm.
But you could always take the stories that you've got and say, are any of those particular stories, could they be expanded upon in terms of, would they be maybe not even the novel length? You could always think about novella and say, well, maybe they're not a novel length, but they could be sort of like, say, 30,000 words as opposed to 10,000 or even 90,000, because 90,000 to 100,000 is the norm for a novel. But I feel like if you could take something and then, something you've already written and then expand upon that universe, you've already got something that could be your template. And then, because I think it's the difficulty is having the core thing, because I write very, very short things, and then I'm writing medium length things, and then moving on to something much longer, you've got to have lots of different characters and things. And I just feel like maybe it's worth trying to explore the characters you've already created in a short story and say, could they live in a bigger universe, and see how that pans out. But that's just my personal opinion, really. So I think we have one more question for you, and then we'd like you to give us a question, Elizabeth. So we'll give you the last question.
I don't have a question unless you have a question for Elizabeth.
I think we've got. I think really the one thing we wanted to ask was, do you have any advice to give any other kind of sort of budding artists or writers and poets out there?
I would just say let's see, how do I say this? One really wonderful thing about writing is that if you have, your basic public school education, you can do it. And I think that any budding artist, anybody who is thinking, gosh, I want to try writing out, give it a shot, because you've got nothing to lose. All you need really is a pen and a piece of paper, or a computer, and most people have those. And if it doesn't work out, you can just delete it. and nobody will know, and that's fine. And I think even though writing is a difficult craft, most people these days can do it, and it's not exclusive to the rich or the people who have lots of resources or lots of education. You can get started, and you can just check out a book about writing. You can check out a nice poetry collection from the library and just read a lot. Try to figure out what the authors you like are doing that make you like their work, and then give it a shot. And I think I just think you don't need to be afraid of not being able to do it, because everyone in any age, I guess, age group, can do it. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could listen to you for hours. You're wise beyond your years, my dear. Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. There's no, there's no class, no race, nothing when it comes to writing. You can do it. And sometimes it takes practice. It just practice, practice, practice. And that it takes, as you said, educate yourself, and you take a mentor, ask questions, and practice, practice, practice all the time. So yeah, I completely agree. Now, time for you to ask us a question.
Yeah, okay. So we talked a little bit earlier about my background and how I have other artistic things in there, like dance and music. And from what I understand, you guys also have varied backgrounds. And I was wondering, as you have been pursuing the skills in each genre, I guess, of art, if you find that it helps you with your writing as well, and anything that you could say about that.
Do you want me to go first then? I was going to say ladies first, but yeah, I mean, my career isn't a conventional one in the terms of the fact that I've done about 17 years, I think, in financial services. So what I would say is that I've always had the artistic kind of drive in the background. I've just never really kind of scratched that itch until much later in life. I wrote a lot of song lyrics in my 20s. I tried to further my career when it comes to working in operations and sales and that sort of stuff. But what I found that when you're talking about how things influence other things, that kind of background has actually helped me in terms of a lot of artists aren't very kind of particularly marketing savvy or financially savvy. And I feel like I can actually draw upon that. So I actually get the best of both worlds, because a lot of artistic people can be very good at what they do, but not know how to market themselves properly. And I think that's why me and Sandrine work very, very well, because we both got marketing backgrounds and the artistic side as well. And when you get those two things working in conjunction with each other, I think that's a lot better for you than just being one or the other. You can be very kind of sort of straight-laced and do a financial career and not have any artistic kind of endeavors, or you can be an artistic person and not be very financially based. And that's what generally most people are. I think when you get the hybrid of things together, and I'm kind of that unique beast in that because I've been doing the kind of marketing and sales and operations side for many years, that's kind of fed into what I do. So when it comes to how do I choose how to position myself, when it comes to how do I promote my writing and my poetry and the other things that I do, that's what drives me in terms of, that's what I'm kind of guides me. And because my writing career, as I say, so I was writing song lyrics in my 20s. I'm in my 40s now. So 20 years ago, I was writing these things that I wanted to be a musician, basically, before I was a poet. And I was writing basically very big song structures. I was writing lots and lots of lyrics with not very many hooks. I knew how songs worked, but they were just too kind of word heavy. And then people just kept saying to me, "This sounds like poetry without music." And I'm just like, oh, so I'm writing music, but I'm writing music without music. It's actually poetry. And I heard that enough times. In the end, I started just turning it into poetry. And then I went to a writer's circle a few years ago. That sadly had to shut down now. But they encouraged me to start a blog. And I started posting my poetry, because I was writing so much poetry, and I had hundreds of pages of poetry that I wanted to try to capitalize on. I didn't start off being a positive person, funnily enough. I actually started, a lot of my poetry was kind of, I wouldn't say it was negative, but it was kind of just like frustrated, kind of sort of in your teens kind of sort of thing. And and then my poetry kind of sort of evolved to the point where I actually preferred to write inspirational poetry, philosophical poetry, funny poetry. I like writing humor, and also romantic poetry. And of recent, it's mostly been inspirational romantic poetry that's been my focus. I do a lot of found poetry. I wrote a spoof of 50 Shades of Grey called 50 Shapes of Cakes. So I've got several different kind of sort of irons in fires. I've written some short stories. Most of them are humorous. Some are quite sort of somber and sad. So I wouldn't say that they kind of embraced the inspirational side, but they were more about sort of dialogue pieces. They're almost like scripts, really, because script writing was an interest to me as well. But I've never really found, just like the novel thing that we chatted about, I've wanted to write a script, but I've never found anything that I could think, oh, that will make a great movie that I could write a thing for. even despite the fact that I've watched tons and tons of movies, and that's my kind of influences me as well. So I'm influenced by funny kind of sort of lyrics on the songs and radio. I love a band called Electric Six, and their lyrics are just so nutty and hilarious that a lot of the time that will influence the humorous side of the stuff that I write. But so that's my kind of sort of background and how we've come to where we are. And I joined up with Sandrine about a year ago. I think it was just over a year ago, to form Auroras and Blossoms. And we gelled so well because of the inspirational side of things that we were doing, that's what became the bond between us. And that's why that's our kind of stuff. That's our background together. And I'll let Sandrine talk about her background as well now. So
finally. I'm just kidding. Thank you for the question, Elizabeth. I have an extremely varied background. So I have a bachelor's degree in English to French translation. That's how I started. And I started my career as a translator. So I've always been interested in the writing aspect of anything. I started writing in French, and then I quickly decided to write in English. And 99% of my writing now is English. But I've done so many different things as an artist, photography. I'm a digital artist as well. I was a journalist, an art critic. I worked in social media as a coach, and I've done so many things. I could write a book on it, but the short end of it is that I really started my artistic career as a poet, as a writer. But everything I have done in my career has led me to where I am today, not just for Auroras and Blossoms and everything we've done with David, but also as a writer in terms of how it has influenced my style and the way I write and the way I see art and the way, as you said, David, I promote myself as well. So it's hard to say exactly how much it has actually influenced my writing, because it's little bits and pieces that I can see. So if I reread what I wrote 10 years ago, I'm like, oh, okay, needed improvement. And indeed, now it is improved. So everything else I have done has definitely helped me to be where I am, and the confidence I have in myself, the healthy confidence I have in myself and in my style right now. So I hope I answered the question.
Thank you for those answers.
Thank you. So, Elizabeth, we want to thank you very, very much for being here with us today. It was a blast listening to you, to listen to your answers. I want to say thank you for submitting your piece to us, because it really moved us. And hearing you talk about it, Homeward Bound, that's the title of the piece. Hearing you talk about it really makes sense as to why it moved us that way. So we're very, very happy that you submitted that piece to us. And I hope a lot of people will get to see it and to enjoy it as much as we did. So for those interested in actually reading Elizabeth's work, it is in issue 1 of our Creative Arts Journal that you can purchase at the address below. So thank you all very much for being with us today. We appreciated you coming and joining us. Elizabeth, again, thank you for being with us today. David, thank you for being here. Thank you to me for being here as well. We will talk to you again very soon. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.